about that. So we're starting with a very special guest and the first return guest to the Slang of Ages podcast. You may remember Joe Williams from season one, where he talked about five of his favorite albums, and I talked about how he was wrong with his five choices. But it's always good to have his musical expertise, his humor, and his guile on the podcast. So, Joe, welcome to the Slang of Ages podcast.
Happy to be here. And just like last time when you originally poo-pooed all my choices, but eventually came around and realized the rightness of my answers, I will do the same again.
Well, I'm just pleased that you're the first person on the podcast to use poo-poo in a sentence. So congratulations on that. Before we get to this podcast, by the way, which is about our favorite concerts. Before we get to that, I want you to talk a little bit about some of the things that you've been doing, because you are an author, a playwright. So what are you working on now?
This past summer, I've been like trying to finish up a play. So it's a comedy set like slash mystery with an all LGBTQ cast of characters. So the hope is that it is actually funny and will serve up some Murder She Wrote realness as well.
That sounds exciting. So when do you think that'll be? Will it be on stage?
That's the kind of hope. So we're going to be doing some table reads this summer, and then I will do a revision. And the hope is that if the revisions go well, that it might get like a staged reading, and then from there, hopefully, it will get a full production at some point. But it's still in the very kind of beginning stages. But as Preston will tell you, it takes me a long time to finish things. And the fact that I was able to write this in 3 months makes me very happy.
Yeah, you should be proud of that. I mean, that's pretty wonderful. And the fact is, I mean, your first book was published what, about 5 or 6 years ago? First
Possibly,
novel.
yes, I should remember that, but it feels like I wrote it for like over a decade. So
Yeah, but you got that done. You got it
yes,
self-published. You got it out, and it's out in the world. And it's called what is it called?
the Fringe Dwellers.
Fringe Dwellers.
Yes,
And then your second novel, you finished that, and you're going to shop that around as well, right?
yes, and still have to come up with a name for it. So Preston Fraser, get on the ball and suggest some names for me.
I could have sworn I gave you five names and you rejected all of them. That's okay. You have better taste in that stuff than I do anyway.
Yes,
And
maybe
then
I'll
of
call it
course,
Slang of Ages. I don't think you copyrighted your thing yet, right?
well, a Slang of Ages technically it's copyrighted by Walter Becker and Donald Fagen, who are Steely Dan, because it's a song. If you would know, if you listen to my podcast, you would
Yeah.
know that. But yeah, that might be a problem. I don't know. But they haven't sued me yet for this podcast, so I guess I'm all
Yeah.
right.
I listened to it, but I was like fast forwarding a lot. So,
Like most people who listen to this podcast do. And of course, you've been on stage doing stand up in Chicago, and you've written stand up as well. So you are perfect person talking about concerts.
yeah. What are my music credentials? Nothing. I pay
None.
to go to shows.
Yes, but we've paid to go to a lot of shows. I think
Yes.
at the height of our concert going together, we saw more than 40 shows in 1 year. So that's a
Yeah,
hell of a lot.
I know. So, and with theater and things like that, it felt like we are doing like over 100 different types of shows a year. It's at one point.
So basically, we are the one percenters. That's really sad.
Yes.
Anyway, so let's get started to with our favorite concerts, and you're going to kick it off with your not number one pick, but your first
Yeah.
pick.
Okay. I put out like 7 of them, but 2 of them I think might be on your list. So I'm going to hope and that I get piggyback and sneak those 2 on in my discussion.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to start out with Prince's last like major time through Chicago, which was in 2012 at the United Center, his Welcome to tour.
Okay.
And I think it got up there not just for his brilliant kind of show, but also that it had Janelle Monáe as an opener. So I thought like she was a amazing starter to the show, and frequently on her own tours, and she puts on an amazing show.
So that was the tour. Oh, a little feedback there. That was a tour that he did for Welcome to America, which was not released until last year. And if I recall, he did a variety of songs from that tour. I think he did maybe one or two from the from America album, which didn't come out till last year. But he did the hits, he did some favorites, he did some rarities, and then he had the encore. And if I recall, we left before the encore.
Yeah, because I think that was the time that he was making the audience like wait for an hour and then maybe would come out for an encore. And maybe in our younger days we would have stayed, until midnight until they kicked us out. But we were ready to go home at a certain time, at a certain age.
Well, see, I did not pick that concert for one of my favorites. And the reason is I didn't particularly like the song selection. I didn't particularly like the band, and that was part of the new Power Generation band. It had three backup singers. They had a number of guests walk on and play instruments, but Prince was the only guitarist. And I really prefer the first time I saw Prince was when he was touring for 1999 with the Revolution. The band that you and I saw at the United Center was a better playing band, more free band, but I like the pop stuff a little bit more. So of the times I've seen Prince, that was probably one of my least favorite times. And then I got the Welcome to America box set last year. I think I reviewed it. I don't know if I did or not. And what I discovered was almost every show that he did on that tour was the same. And almost every encore was the same. And I'm glad we didn't sit through that encore. It wasn't really worth it in my mind.
Huh. And what did he do for the encore? I didn't look that up.
He did a number of covers. He did Play That Funky Music, White Boy. He did a number of like R&B covers. He didn't
Yeah,
do anything which was like, whoa, this is Prince doing a rarity
yeah,
that he does. So I was like, okay, it was good because it's Prince. But
yeah. Yeah, I put it on my list just because it was the only time I've seen Prince live, and it was just the presence of a genius who just like sitting and listening to play guitar and watching him play guitar, just how he
mhm.
commands a stage was a really kind of magical type of moment. Now, I would much have rather have seen one of the earlier tours. I think I was watching PBS and they had a tape recording of the Purple Rain tour. And when you kind of saw that, that was like, I think, as you kind of said, a little bit less kind of structured kind of feeling, but and it had some more vital energy to it. So
Mm.
it wasn't as polished, but it was still like just a brilliant kind of show. But I think like any top five without a Prince feels like it misses the mark in terms of concert going.
Well, I mean, the thing is, Prince never did a bad concert, and all his tours were great. Purple Rain tour was one where he was really frustrated because he had to do the same thing every night, and people
Yeah,
who never didn't know his music except for Purple Rain were there. So the
yeah,
old stuff they didn't get,
yeah,
and the new stuff they knew, but he got bored with it, which is
yeah.
why he kind of cut that tour short and didn't really tour much of America until before his death. So, good start, Joe. I disagree with you. You're wrong, but good start. But a very memorable concert because it was the last time I saw Prince alive. So my first one on my list is St. Vincent and David Byrne from 2012, I believe, the summer 2012. It's the Love This Giant tour. And the Love This Giant album was one that Byrne and St. Vincent did together, but they didn't really do it together. They recorded had different beats recorded, they had different instruments recorded, different program recorded. They sang their parts separate, they meshed it all together, did the lyrics together. So the album actually, which I have, and it's a good album. I think you maybe you gave it to me, maybe you didn't, but it's a good album. But the album was extremely sterile in my mind. It really muted St. Vincent's guitar playing because she's such a fantastic musician and a great vocalist. And David Byrne, solo stuff I didn't particularly love. The concert, on the other hand, was fantastic. And if I got this right, Joe, I think you got the tickets to this, but you couldn't go for some reason. Do you remember
Yeah.
that?
So, yeah, unfortunately, like my stepfather-in-law, was ill at that time and was, in bad shape. So I couldn't make the concert. So I was spending time with family, although I was disappointed to miss the concert as a whole because St. Vincent and David Byrne are both individually amazing, live performers, and the opportunity to see them together, was sounds like it was a very magical experience for you.
It was a magical experience. It was a very they had a very small band, Byrne, St. Vincent, a bassist, a guitar, and keyboardist, and I think a background singer. So a very small band, but it was a highly choreographed show where she did most of the guitar work actually, but they had these steps, these dance moves intertwined between the two of them, and it was just magical. And they had this really great abstract lighting, and the music really came alive, especially the songs from that album, which again I didn't think were like great in the album, but they have such a passion to them. And it's one of the few concerts I've gone to where I didn't really have a good feel for the music that I was going to hear because it was new to me, but I still love the concert. So thank you, Joe, for that. That tour went on for a while in America. I think they did, let me check. They did about 18 songs during that show and 4 encores. The tour didn't really vary much. The songs didn't really vary much during the tour. So uh thank you, Joe, for that. Very good concert. What's your next pick?
Let's see. So, actually, first I thought it was like interesting that you brought up, that the live show was, a little bit more interesting than the recorded kind of
Much
version. I
better.
find that, like, even though I love St. Vincent's, albums, I also find like she's a more dynamic live performer and the songs come to life a lot more.
Mhm.
Her 2014 show almost made my top list, but she had like a really great show for that. But I'll just jump to my number one show since it relates to what you just talked about, and that was David Byrne's most recent American
Mhm.
Utopia
Mhm.
tour. And I think just the staging of that was so brilliant and different than anything I've kind of seen that is this kind of perpetual motion type of thing where all the percussion, everyone was constantly moving and standing and in this kind of perfectly choreographed one. So even though it was like a national tour, very fitting that it eventually went to Broadway because it actually felt like a Broadway type caliber show in terms of the choreography and the staging. And so that one is probably my top concert that I've kind of been to.
Yeah, that I'm not a huge David Byrne fan. I keep saying that, yet I seem to see it a lot in concert. That was probably the best concert, if not in the top 3 of any concert I've ever seen, because even though it was choreographed, because it had to be, because there were probably 14, 18 musicians on stage at a time.
Yeah, and it wasn't a huge stage in terms of like not running into each other and just the precision that you had to like make your turns.
Yep, yep, exactly. But it was so well choreographed, yet it didn't seem stilted in any way. The music was superb, going through his entire catalog. And the singing was great. Everyone in that band had multiple roles, including Byrne, who had to do the dance moves as well as play guitar occasionally, as well as sing. Yet, I think through 17 songs, they did a fantastic job. But one thing you touched on is, if you think about it, that really was a Broadway type show because the production quality in terms of staging, the abstract lighting, the Vera lights, the shadows was very Broadway. And it didn't have a real set to the stage. It just had a blank stage, which was used really as a canvas to focus the music. So it was, again, one of my favorite concerts of all time. Just a great musical experience.
Showing how David Byrne is such a singular kind of talent. The fact that, with everyone dressed pretty much the same and, doing lots of different choreography, he still managed to draw the attention to himself. That is, you're always looking at David Byrne on the stage. And, he also maintained his eccentricity as well. That is, it was never, like a canned kind of performance. His personality always shined through while he was on the stage.
Yeah, that's true. The thing is, it is a canned performance. Every
Yeah,
performance was probably exactly the same.
yeah,
And when we get to one of the other artists on your list, we'll talk about that because there is very little spontaneity in music, live music now. And I like one of my favorite Don Henley quotes where he says, "Well, music's just not musical anymore because there's not much. Every night you go out, you do the same thing." So the next artist on my list, at the time, didn't really reflect that. I'm talking about Dire Straits. 19 October 10th, 1985 at the Hartford Civic Center, which was the um second time I saw Dire Straits on that tour. I saw them 2 weeks earlier at the Meriwether Post Pavilion in Columbia, Maryland. But this show was particularly special for me. It was a 45-day tour for Dire Straits, and they have toured America before, but this was their first big tour because it was for Brothers in Arms, which was their biggest album. And but what Dire Straits faced was that a lot of American fans knew the hits. They knew Money for Nothing, they knew Walk of Life, but they didn't know songs like Once Upon a Time in the West or Ride Across the River, which was a song from Brothers in Arms, or Espresso Love. So they had to go out there and impress an audience who didn't know their music as well as European audiences. This was also my favorite version of Dire Straits because it had the great Terry Williams on drums, who worked with Dave Edmondson and Rock Powell. You had Jack Sonney, who was a guy who worked in a guitar shop in New York, who danced around stage with so much energy. Then you had the original guy, Mark Knopfler and John Illsley. You had the two keyboardists and a saxophone player. But there was so much energy on the stage, mostly from Terry Williams and Jack Sonney, that the audience could feel it. And that was also the first tour where they did staging, huge staging. They had these beautiful Verilights, electronic, computer controlled lighting, moving stage. So the music was great, but the show was actually not something you would expect from Mark Knopfler. And every time I've seen Mark Knopfler as a solo artist, except for once, when I saw him in Wilmington, Delaware for the Sailing to Philadelphia tour, the shows have never come close to the energy that Dire Straits had back in '85. And when they toured again for the last time in '92, it was such a disappointment.
yeah. It's interesting to see that they had like the staging elements to it. Because if you watch, and I've seen Mark Knopfler, and he's actually the next one I will talk about is my kind of choice as a top concert, but it's a very stripped down. It's about him and the musicians, and there's no frills in terms of fancy lighting or staging. And as some of my other choices will know, I love a gaudy spectacle, so I'm not the word for wise person poo-pooing that choice. But yeah, I would love to have seen the Dire Straits, tour, the Brothers in Arm tour after you described that one.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah, but one on my list is Mark Knopfler. There's two shows that I had that I thought were kind of spectacular: the 2010 tour and then 2015. Forget what albums he was doing. Was it All the Road Running for one of those tours?
No, no,
No,
no, no, no, no, no. You're wrong.
I almost got it.
No, 2010, we saw him at the Chicago Theater. We saw him on April 23rd, 2010, Chicago Theater, and that was the Get Lucky tour. So I can't even name two songs from Get Lucky.
Yeah. Yeah, I can't remember the kind of names, but the reason why I made my top list is just the musicianship. Like his guitar playing was just, stellar, where you almost want to close your eyes and just listen to the sound. And unlike most artists, I think he actually paid attention to the sound system. And so, like every instrument from every person on the stage and the vocals, they were all pristine. It wasn't that the band was overwhelming the vocals or vice versa. It was just definitely a sonic experience. And so, even though I don't often go back and listen to Mark Knopfler's albums, solo albums that much, I think that like live experience is the way to truly kind of get Mark Knopfler's music.
Why, I think you really hit the nail on the head. And that one thing Mark Knopfler, why he left, why he ended Dire Straits, was they were making a shitload of money. They still are making a lot of money with their catalog. But one reason he wanted to stop it was because it became about the spectacle and about the hits, and people didn't pay attention to the music. So he wanted to strip away all that and really just focus on the music because he had enough money. So on his subsequent tours, he had some sympathetic, mostly Nashville musicians working with him who didn't play loud rock and roll music. It was kind of mellow. He would make an occasional musical statement with his guitar, but that really was what it was all about in terms of his music. I remember that tour a little bit, and I have the deluxe copy of the album, and it's fine. All his music is fine, but it's hardly like the most memorable thing. Now you mentioned the All the Road Running album, and I saw that tour. You didn't come with me. And that was the same day as Gay Pride in Chicago. So I left Pride early to go to Northern Ireland to see Emmylou Harris and Mark Knopfler. And of all the solo tours I've seen with Knopfler, that was probably his best. I'm glad I left Pride for it, but that did not make my list because the Dire Straits in my mind was so much more powerful. But this is the reason why he won't ever reconstitute Dire Straits, because he doesn't need the money and because he doesn't need the spectacle. Interesting choice, Joe.
Yeah, and I would say even though the part of me wants to see him perform with Dire Straits again, just like I want to see Robert Plant perform with Led Zeppelin and David Byrne go back with Talking Heads, I do actually appreciate that at least all three of them feel like, we're going to do what is musically guiding us, and they really care about what they are putting out and also moving forward with their music as opposed to just rehashing all of the hits.
See, I disagree a little. That's not the only reason. It's like, why can't people say, well, why can't Peter Cetera get back with Chicago or Steve Perry get back with Journey? Well, the biggest reason is money, because Cetera, we're totally off subject now. Cetera demanded 50% of the profits from the band. They wouldn't give it to them. They knew they can get someone to sing the songs and people will still come to the concerts. And same with Steve Perry. So they got rid of those guys. And also, the sad truth is Steve Perry can't sing Journey songs in the same key. He has to sing them 3 steps down, and Peter Cetera is retired.
Yeah.
Robert Plant can't sing. We've seen Robert Plant twice, I think, together. He can't sing those songs. Can't.
No, he's definitely doing different keys as well. Definitely more of that gravelly sound, for his kind of more solo concerts.
And I think it was probably another person on my list, Steve Lukather from Toto, said, if we knew that we would be singing these songs in our 50s and 60s, we would have written them way lower.
Yeah.
So next on my list is kind of not a surprise if you know me. And of course, this is the Slang of Ages podcasting, named after a Steely Dan song. So next on my list is Steely Dan from the Beacon Theater in New York, September 17th, 2011. And that night, and I've seen Steely Dan maybe 30 times, probably more than most artists have seen, period. But that night was special because flew to New York, spent the long weekend in New York, and went to the Rarity show. And these were songs that the band said they have never performed live or haven't performed live since the early 70s. So in that respect, it was special because they did songs like, I have to read my list here. They did songs like The Jack of Speed. The Jack of Speed is on their Grammy Award-winning album, Two Against Nature, but the version they did had the original vocals by Walter Becker instead of Donald Fagen, and it was done as a shuffle. And what was funny was Walter forgot the lyrics halfway through the song, which was hilarious because he never sang it that way before. Did the song Pearl of the Quarter, the famous song, The Second Arrangement, which was supposed to be a gaucho, but was erased by an engineer. They did the song called American Lovers. They had the background singer sing it. Never been done before. And they did this All Too Mobile Home from the 1973 tour. So a combination of songs they'd never done before, a combination of risk they took on the stage, which they have not done since. And it was some mistakes made. It wasn't perfect, but it was, if you're a Steely Dan fan, it was simply beautiful.
Yeah. Now, I know this will get me permanently banned from Preston Fraser's podcast, but yeah, I never quite warmed up to Steely Dan myself. Like, they're pleasant. I appreciate them. They're nice to listen to, but they never really grab me when I am seeing them. I've only seen them live once, but they were okay. The
You're a
musicians
dick. You're a total dick.
I know. Well, I could also tell you that the longest time I thought your slang of ages was referring to something about Def Leppard. I'm not sure why, but that's what always was. Thinking Rock of Ages and something like that.
The album Slang and the song Rock of Ages together. I like that, actually.
I did my own mashup.
That's actually pretty smart. Okay. Well, you're a total dick. Okay, you're up next.
Yeah. Well, let's go to Aerosmith. Which is Lord. A surprise one on my kind of list.
Christ.
This is back when I was in graduate school in Columbus, and truthfully, I won free tickets. And I still remember that it was a trip like Oscar, party trivia contest, and the question was, and this, keep in mind, was in 1997-ish. Was like, what was the last band to win a best song Oscar? Because it was always more individual artist, and so it was the kind of band, and I knew that it was Berlin from the Top Gun kind of soundtrack, and so I won these tickets. They said, you won the grand prize, and I was like, oh yes. They said, it's Aerosmith tickets, and I thought, And truthfully, I tried to sell the tickets.
Oh my God.
Because I wasn't that big of a fan, but people weren't giving me, they're giving me pennies on the dollar. So I thought, I'm going to spite those people and just go to the concert anyway.
I'll show them. I'm going to listen to bad music. Fuck up.
Turned out to be an amazing, tour. I think it was their 9 Lives tour. But, if you look like a band that is enjoying themselves on stage, and Steven Tyler, this has a amazing voice that he could just belt those out for an entire 2-hour concert. And just, and it kind of contrasted to a recent Rolling Stones one where I just thought this was right after, I think Keith Richards' autobiography came out, and the band, Mick Jagger and Keith, weren't getting along too well, but you could feel like there was no energy on the stage and they weren't enjoying each other's company. And, Aerosmith just felt like we're here to throw out a big party and really entertain the fans. And there was just song after song of, you forget how many great songs Aerosmith, has as a whole. And so that kind of surprised me because it was a concert I did not want to go to, and ended up being one of my favorite concerts I've seen.
Okay, so this one actually stinks. So you saw him in Columbus, Ohio, right?
Yes.
So that was August 28th, 1997. 18 songs, 5 encores. It was for the 9 Lives tour. It was also a 3-year-long tour. So they really toured the shit out of that album. And for good reason, because the album sold more albums than any album Aerosmith has ever sold. So we had the song Love in the Elevator, Ragdoll, Janie's Got a Gun, Lost Child, Monkey on the Block, Hole in My Soul, blah, 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 blah. Do Looks Like a Lady. 5 encores. This was one of the rock tours famous or infamous for using backing tracks. Where backing tracks not only for Tyler's lead vocal, backing tracks for the backing vocals, backing tracks for the rhythm section. They were infamous for it because they had to produce a sheen of the Bruce Fairbairn, I think was his name, producer who's dead now, album. So that's the first time they ventured into using backing tracks, and from then until now, they've been using backing tracks. It's not live; it's Memorex.
Way to ruin a good memory for me, Preston Fraser. That's the wonders of being at the 200 level of a big arena. Sometimes you can't tell.
Yes,
but it does take away some of that. I'd rather hear an imperfect, musician and vocalist than have it kind of pre-canned and recorded. Why like sometimes Madonna didn't quite make my list, though I love her gaudy spectacle just because of the kind of canned aspect. And one of my favorite moments from one of her concerts was actually just sat down and played the guitar, and her
Mm-hmm.
vocals were, I think it was like a version that she did a slow down, stripped down version of. And the vocals weren't great. I mean, you could feel her cracking a lot and not able to hit the notes, but it was still like the most dynamic, portion of her show because it just felt live and it felt kind of rawer. So it just
Right.
disappointed here. One of my top choices was more of a canned concert one. So I might have to disagree or agree with your disagreeing of it, which makes me want to ban myself from the podcast that I have to agree with you on something.
I like peeing on people's selections. That's my job. And you can pee on mine if you want to. I mean, and the thing is, it's me. This is something I kind of learned from you. If you like it, you like it. It doesn't matter what
Exactly.
people think about the musicianship or how Fred Tackett
Yeah.
played or whatever the hell it is. If you like it, that's fine.
Yeah.
And my thing is, I've gone to some concerts where I know night after night after night it'll be the same damn thing. Man, a good example is when we saw Chris Isaac open for Stevie Nicks, where he would do that thing where he would talk to the audience, and he'd come down to the audience and sing to a chick. And we saw him the same tour. He did the same damn thing.
Yeah. So, and also it almost would have made that Stevie Nicks, Chris Isaac, the first one we kind of saw with him, make it to the top of,
Yep.
towards the top of my list. But after seeing the second one where this kind of spontaneous ad lib that you were like, oh, this is amazing, and realize it was just a canned response, kind of
Yep.
lessened it a tiny bit and dropped it a tiny bit in my mind. Although still a great concert with him and Stevie Nicks.
Yeah, you don't want to see behind the curtain sometime. The next concert on my list kind of fits into that vein where it was highly produced. It was perfect, if almost perfect, if not perfect. It was canned, and I still loved it. And it's because of you. You picked this because it was Dolly Parton at Ravinia Festival, August 7th, 2016. That was her Pure and Simple tour. I think that was her last album, maybe her latest album, anyway, which was really more of an acoustic, more country album. For that album, she had, if I recall, Joe, as four piece all male band, but they trade off on different instruments. Dolly played a lot of guitar. She played electric guitar, acoustic guitar. She played banjo. Her voice was spot on and perfect. I think she did 16 songs on that tour, on that show, and she does all the songs that you wanted to do. I mean, she did Little Sparrow, she did Jolene, she did the song Pure and Simple. It was You don't have to be a country fan to appreciate the musicianship and the craftsmanship that Dolly put into that show. It was amazing.
Yeah. And it kind of reminds me a little bit of my Prince choice in terms of, and part of the reason they're up there is that you got like one chance to kind of see them,
Mhm.
before they possibly will stop, touring. And so, I think that's why it was also a big highlight for me. Plus, Dolly Parton, she just exudes warmth from the stage and this personality. Like I think she might have some of the best kind of stage banter of, that's just very natural seeming.
Mhm.
As we know,
Mhm.
natural seeming may not always
Seeming.
be the kind of case. I think I saw on Facebook that it might have been like today or yesterday, like whatever year it was, to this date that we saw Dolly Parton at Ravinia. So I think it was very fitting that that is your choice.
Yeah, like I said, it was August 7th, 2016.
Yeah.
Okay, what's next for you?
And then I think my last one is I wanted a show that is like a big gaudy spectacle. So I
Okay.
love Vegas. I love all those kind of, things where sometimes the music is a good portion of it, but the staging is probably even a bigger portion. So I'm thinking of, tours like Madonna or Cher or Bette Midler,
Mm.
or even Celine Dion, which almost made my list for one of her Vegas shows. Again, an artist whose music I'm not like a huge fan of, but her kind of spectacle was kind of worth it. But the one I went with was Pink's Beautiful Trauma Tour at the United Center in 2018. And
Mm,
this is in
mm,
her
mm.
full circus act, swinging around the stadium type of thing. But I think
Mhm.
it kind of it's just a big glorious spectacle where you're just kind of just happy watching, her perform.
Okay, so do you listen to the Slang of Ages podcast by any chance?
I do.
You listen to all
Not
the
all the episodes.
episodes? Okay. Because Pink did come up in the episode where I talked to Susan
Your sisters,
Fraser
right?
and Cheryl Fraser.
Yeah.
And we talked about, I think it was this tour actually, because this was an interesting tour where she divided the show up into different acts and she did a bunch of different songs and she had all that spectacle. Let's see, United Center was March 10th, 2018. And my comment to Susan was because she did 19 songs, a lot of different musicians. It was a big tour with 91 shows for that year and a half tour. A lot of it was programmed, a lot of it's pre-recorded. It was my understanding was the video was extremely wonderful and people love the music. And again, if you like you said, spectacle, good songs, good singing in quotes. Yeah, it was all there.
Yeah. And she does have a good voice. I know some of it had to be canned. That is, you can't be swinging, you know, with like by your kind of like wrist on these kind of straps and being floated around the thing and have pristine sound. But I think, when she did sing, and she does have a very strong voice, as a whole. So,
Mm.
and again, I love my big gaudy spectacle kind of shows where it feels like all your concert dollar is being seen on the stage. And I think she had like a gigantic inflatable M&M,
Ah,
blow up doll as well. So how can you not love a show that has that?
that's true. If you like spectacle and you like good songs, you can't go wrong with that. And that is on video. So if you want to check that out, please do. All right. So this is really hard because I have to pick one more for my fifth. Is this my fifth? Do I have? I don't know. I think I wasn't counting. All right. So I want to go with one which is kind of a heartstrings one. Um, Joni Mitchell, who was the middle act. The opening act was Dave Alvins and the Guilty Men, and the headliner was Bob Dylan. This was at the Cole Field House in College Park, Maryland, 1998. This would be Joni's Turbulent and Dingo tour. And she was really at the height of her power. So she probably wouldn't say that because Dave Alvins came out. I never really was a Blasters fan or Dave Alvins fan. And he was amazing. Great stage presence, great songs, great playing. Joni Mitchell came out, beautiful, elegant. She had her synthesizer guitar. She had Larry Klein on bass, her ex-husband, Greg Lease on pedal steel guitar, the wonderful Brian Blade on drums, and some trumpet player. I don't remember what his name was. And she did a 12-song set. She had a husky voice because her voice had gone down several octaves since the 70s. Her playing was actually excellent. The sound was perfect. She did some of the songs we wanted her to do, like she did Woodstock, she did Black Crow, she did some newer songs like Crazy Cries of Love. She just did the Newport Jazz Festival. She did this guitar solo part from the song Just Like This Train, but she changed the lyrics, making fun of Bob Dylan. It was wonderful. And it was my first time seeing her. Little did I know I only see her one more time and then she would stop touring. So perfect show. Then Bob Dylan came on with his full big band and he did a mediocre show.
Yeah, I think Bob Dylan might be, if we had a list of like five most disappointing
Disappointing
concerts, I think
shows. He'd
Bob
be in
Dylan
there.
would be up there where, I mean, he didn't interact with the audience whatsoever. It's just like song after song after song, like going into them. I think this was in around the Time Out of Mind kind of time, but he did kind of sped up versions of all the songs and they just lost a lot of their kind of like heartbreak or meaning and kind of, subtleties that is on the CD. And it just felt like it didn't really capture the magic I thought that his CD did. So it's one of the kind of rare things where someone's CD is substantially better than their live kind of tour of it.
And the sad thing is that band that he plays with, he's been playing with them for on and off with most of them for over 20 years. They are fantastic on record, but he does these arrangements or rearrangements, which seem to all be in the same key and almost all at the same tempo, like you said. So they kind of run into each other, and you can barely hear his lyrics. And one of the things that Joni Mitchell talked about in this tour was that Dylan would come to her and say, "Oh, I love how your voice sounds, that the new smoky voice, and your sound is so clear." And she says, "How do you?" He talked about how she got her voice that way. She said, "What experience?" But he was really concerned about her sound being so clear because the audience was loving her and they weren't giving him any reaction or a negative reaction. So he fired a sound man.
Yeah, I don't know if that was the problem. I think it's more his approach to the kind of concerts. And it's hard to
Yeah.
criticize someone as genius as Bob Dylan. It's just, I think he's better on album than he is live, for it. But also, I think you touched on something that I like with, concerts is when the artist talks a little bit about the song and gives some little backstory
Mhm.
or, interesting tidbit about the writing of the song or what it means to them. And like, it peppers in a few of those, not every single song, but like, gives some insight in terms of, their music and their personality.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what we want. So that was five, right?
That was five,
Do you
plus a
have
whole bunch of other ones we sneaked in.
any? Well, I'll let you sneak in a few, but I have to go to bed because I'm old.
Don't worry, just keep the camera running. I'll just keep talking.
So honorable mentions, Joe.
I hope you bought a lot of cloud space. So some honorable mentions. I did talk about Poi Dog Pondering City Winery and Chicago residency. It was a 5-night stand that they did, mainly because in my previous podcast, I mentioned them as one of my top 5 ones and already talked about it there. But it was just great to see like a kind of smaller band have a sold out 5-night residency
Mhm.
and just kind of kill it where they put, so many musicians on the small stage, but the sound, was really enveloping. So, and I think Paul Simon's farewell tour actually was a very kind of nice one. Like, partially through, I think he, like having this big kind of, band, he did this small string quartet kind of section and did some
Mhm.
songs, with just a string quartet. And it just made you really appreciate his craft of, songwriting. And then Rufus Wainwright, I think, we saw him at Old Town School of Folk Music, which has its own story behind it.
Yes, it
But I like
does.
that venue because the sound there is just really kind of nice, especially for a voice like Rufus Wainwright, where it kind of pierces through the, venue. Although I recently saw Rufus Wainwright in probably one of the more disappointing concerts I've been to. His sound was great. He did one of his Judy Garland type of shows where I think when she originally performed it, she had, the first act and then intermission and the second act. And Rufus Wainwright, was selling, tickets, at premium prices, like $100 kind of a
Mhm.
pop. And rather than doing the whole concert, he did, act one in one concert and act two in the other.
Oh,
So
that's a ripoff.
yeah, the whole concert was 67 minutes total
Oh
for
my
the one we
God.
went to. And that was with him padding it with some songs that weren't on the official concert kind of list and including a bunch of stage patter as well. So, even though he sounded great and the music was good, it's just like charge a little bit extra and make it one kind of concert rather than two separate ones that you're making people pay $100 twice to go see.
So basically, he asked you to bring your own lube for his
Yes.
concert because that's really sad. And,
Yeah.
and quite frankly, I've never seen a bad Rufus concert. He came close to making my list. The one you mentioned at Old Town School of Folk Music was marvelous, was magical. The first time we saw him with his band, his rock band at Ravinia Festival, that was also magical. And then we saw him again at one of the Chicago theaters that usually houses um, musicals, and he was doing his piano thingy when he had this long flowing dress that came out.
Right.
Venice, I saw him. That was magical. All of them are great. I'm going back to your suggestion about Poi Dog Pondering. I would never have seen Poi Dog Pondering but for you. And I remember seeing them at Lollapalooza Very much enjoyed them. Very much enjoyed them there. But I think my favorite Poi Dog Pondering moment was when we saw them at the Chicago Symphony Hall with the Chicago Symphonata, I think it's called.
Yes.
And that was mind blowing.
Yeah.
And the songs, the arrangements, the orchestra, everything. It was just, they never have disappointed me. For a person who's not really a big fan of the music, I am a fan of the music because the live stages, the live shows is incredible.
And
So
yeah, the
go ahead.
Sinfonietta one was really interesting because sometimes the symphony with a major artist is kind of a gimmicky thing where like they don't mesh together, or there was not as
Yep.
much effort into figuring out how do we take this style and make it one cohesive piece.
Yep.
And I think Poi Dog Pondering managed to do that very well.
So you gave three ones. I'm going to give three as well. I'm going to start with the band China Crisis. The first time I saw China Crisis was for their tour in 1986. I think it was a What Price Paradise album. I saw them at the 930 Club in Washington, D.C. And for those of you who don't know, the 930 Club was originally located at 930 F Street in DC, which is how it got its name. They moved the club, in my mind, changed the whole thing, but they kept the name. Anyway, 930 Club at the time was a small indie club, standing room only. I was young, I could do that. College crowd. They have some opening band, I don't remember who they were. They came out full band, what China Crisis was at the time, a six-piece band. Musicianship was outstanding. The drummer, Kevin Wilkerson, rest in peace, was a monster. He went on to be a drummer and Squeeze, and he killed himself. The singer was great. The guitarist was great. The saxophonist was great. And the music was great from that album and also from Flaunt the Imperfection, which is also a season one of this podcast. What was most memorable, Joe, about that concert was there was this really hot guy in the front row and this other guy, and they were talking really loud from the singer. They started pushing each other, and they spilled the drink on the singer, on Gary London's, Gary, can't remember his last name, but Gary's leg. So Gary calls the guy over to the stage just like this. Come over to the stage. He waves him over. The guy thinks he's going to tell him something. And the guy leans in and Gary slaps the shit out of him. Slaps him hard.
Yeah.
Then the guy gets kicked out.
Yeah.
And they play a few more songs. And then we wait around for the encore. And they said, fuck you all. We're not doing an encore. So that guy screwed us all over. But the music was great. And every time I could see China Crisis, whether it be the full band or just the two of them, Gary and Eddie, I'll do it. And I saw them a few weeks ago in Nashville. Okay.
So I could never see them again because it would have to be a disappointment because every time I'm probably hoping that he's going to slap someone else from the front of the stage. And when it doesn't happen, I know I'm going to be disappointed.
And the thing is, as they've grown older, they took a few years off from China Crisis to raise families. And now they're in their late 50s, 60s. So now their stage show is really loose. I mean, the music's great, but they tell these funny stories and they talk about where they've been, talk about the people they met. It is almost comedy. It is not the same every night, which I love.
Yeah, I think similarly. I think I saw the Zombies recently at Old Town School of Folk Music. Who put on a great, show, but definitely just hearing the stories of how you're recording and Beatles just happen to be like right nearby, and hearing like those kind of stories often make a concert. And to see people in their 70s and 80s still kind of rocking it out and doing really well on stage. It's always nice to see.
That is good. So next is Joe Jackson. This is Joe Jackson, the big band from the Blaze of Glory tour. So it may have been my first time seeing Joe Jackson. It was August 6th, 1989. And that tour, the Blaze of Glory album, did okay for Jackson. It was a 79 concert tour, 21 songs, 4 encores. It was a big band in that he had two guitars, bass player, extra keyboardist, percussionist, drummer, 4-piece horn section, backing vocals. And they did songs from the Blaze of Glory album, which had a big band, and then he had like a whole string of hits, hit after hit after hit. Right and Wrong, Is She Really Going Out with Him, Down to London, 19 Forever, Discipline, Human Touch, Stepping Out, I'm Your Man, Jump and Jive. He started the concert with just him and the bassist. I think it was Graham maybe on bass. And Graham came out, it was still daylight. It was Meriwether Post Pavilion, so it was outside. Daylight. Graham came out, started playing this bass part from You Can't Get What You Want. Then one by one, the musicians would come out and just join in. So it was this big, huge sound. And Jackson was in great voice. He was in he had great conversation. He was funny. But the highlight for me was the last song on the set. And it was a huge emotional catharsis where he sang the song. I'm not sure if you know the song, a slow song from the Night and Day album. Or it's
Not
from
familiar with that one.
It's not from Night and Day. It's from the big album before that. But it's just builds and builds and builds, and he had this wonderful sax solo. And by the time they finished, I was literally crying like a bitch. I loved it. It was such a uplifting and sad and all these emotions mixed into one. So there we go. Joe Jackson, Meriwether Post Pavilion, Blaze of Glory tour, August 6, 1989.
Complete with Preston tears.
Yeah, crying like a little girl. Joe, I love you. Okay, so was that one or two? That was two. I gave you Joni. No, that was one. My first one. Second one.
Yeah.
That was two.
I think so.
I think you're cutting me off. All right, what's my podcast? I do what I want. So next one is Toto. 1993, June 11th, at the Chestnut Cabaret in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. It's what I call Your Drummer is Dead tour, because Jeff Porcaro had died the year prior. He just added a new drummer. I had no idea who it was because it was before the internet. And had this huge drum kit on stage, this huge yellow drum kit. It was a small club, and this band was really at the low point in their popularity. And they could barely get people to come to a small club. And they played 24 songs, played their heart out from the new album, King of Desire. They played the hits. They played Africa. The new drummer was Simon Phillips. They had a percussionist and 3 backing singers to sing the high parts because they fired their prior singer. And they had such energy and passion for the music when they had such a small crowd and people didn't give a shit. And now look at them. They're big again.
Yeah. It's amazing, even in 1993, that they weren't drawing, enough people to fill up the kind of space. I mean, if you think of like now, when all you need is 2 hits and you could pretty much tour for the rest of your life, and given the number of hits that they had, that at least at that kind of time, it was much harder to draw that crowd.
Yep, that's exactly it. Now, I mean, they've been doing it for 48 years, and now they're almost bigger than they've ever been. So that's good.
Yeah. Question is, do they play Stranger in Town, which it cannot be a top concert without Stranger in Town.
And last time I saw them, they played Stranger in Town. And probably 2 times I saw them. So, and actually David Paich, who wrote Africa and sang Stranger in Town, was supposed to interview him today, but he had a close friend die today. So we had to postpone that.
When you do, tell him it's my favorite song.
I'm going to mention that to him when I talk to him. I think it'll be probably in 2 weeks. I have a few more mentioned since I'll sneak them in. Mark Knopfler sailing from Philadelphia to Philadelphia tour. Saw him in Delaware. Leonard Cohen live in Chicago. Amazing show. Rodney Crowell at Blues Alley in Baltimore, Maryland. Linda Thompson, not Teddy, not Richard, Linda Thompson, Keswick Theater, October 29th, 2002.
All good choices. I didn't see those specific concerts, but great artists. I'm surprised the band Chicago didn't sneak into your list somehow.
The only Chicago show which would have made it probably been a show where they had the fan club come down to Northern Island to see them record opening for a morning show where they were making fun of each other and singing out of tune. And then also
Yeah.
when I was almost trampled by the fat lady, that probably would have done it too.
Yes, I do remember that moment
Yeah.
where, like, I didn't know what was happening, but like when I guess a certain song came on, it was like a sign for the fan club to rush the kind of stage, which was they allowed it because there was like a little roped off area.
Hmm.
But Preston didn't kind of tell me that this was going to be the song it was going to be, and so when I finally said time to go, I was like bending down, picking up my thing, and I looked up and Preston was nowhere to be found. I look up and he's just running down the aisle,
Like a high
and
school girl.
yeah, I had to get almost getting trampled by many large women who were also running at full speed to get down to the front of the stage. And then
And
the
for
other Chicago,
go ahead.
the other Chicago moment was, remember their Stonehenge type moment from
Oh yes,
Spinal
the
Tap?
flag.
Yeah, they had like this big patriotic flag that they were doing, and they start to unfurl it from the top of the stage, and it just gets stuck halfway from unfurling, and they were like trying to work to get it to unfurl properly. I can't remember. Do they actually get it to unfurl?
They get it almost on fro. And
Yeah.
that's during, if you're a Chicago fan, you've gone to a concert, you know that during the song Free, they used to drop a flag down in front of the stage and people would scream, get all patriotic.
Yeah.
Now they have the screens that show the
Yeah.
American flag. But that was particularly funny because I could have imagined the flag getting caught in the lights and catching
I
on
know.
fire and killing all the fat people, but it
Yeah.
didn't happen. So, Joe, anything else to add?
No, it's been a great conversation. Some good choices by me, and your choices are good too.
Well, I appreciate all the concerts that you forced me to go to because there's so many
Yeah.
concerts I probably would not have gone to, which were fantastic. And a lot of the concerts I talked about, you had picked on my list as well. We had some stinkers along the way
Yeah.
too, but not many.
Yeah. But the good moments far outweigh the kind of bad end. I went to a lot of bands I never would have gone to, without you kind of pushing me to go with them, saying it'd be great. And most of the time, they were great concerts.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you again for being on the Slang of Ages podcast and being the only special guest to appear twice. And I will reach out to you again for season number 4. So thank you, Joe. I'm gonna sign off here.
Okay. Thanks for having me on.
Sure. Bye.
Okay. Bye.
Uh